I remember the first time I stepped into the sun-drenched studio of Marcus Hale. The walls were adorned with vibrant canvases, each one a testament to his genius. I was a young artist, barely out of art school, filled with dreams and aspirations. Marcus was everything I wanted to be: successful, respected, and, most importantly, a master of his craft. He took me under his wing, offering guidance and support that I had never experienced before. To me, he was not just a mentor, he was a father figure, filling a void I didn't even know existed. In those early days, I was in awe of him. He had a way of seeing the world that was both beautiful and haunting. He taught me to embrace my emotions, to pour them onto the canvas, and to let my art speak for itself. I spent countless hours in his studio, learning the intricacies of color theory, brush techniques, and the delicate balance of light and shadow. He encouraged me to explore my own style, to find my voice, and for the first time, I felt like I was on the brink of something extraordinary. But as the months passed, I began to notice something unsettling. My ideas, the very concepts I had shared with Marcus in confidence, started appearing in his work. At first, I brushed it off as coincidence. After all, great minds think alike, right? But as I saw my unique visions transformed into his celebrated pieces, a seed of doubt began to take root in my heart. I felt a mix of pride and confusion. He was my mentor, after all, and I wanted to believe he was simply inspired by my passion. The first real blow came when Marcus unveiled his latest exhibition. I stood in the gallery, surrounded by critics and art enthusiasts, my heart racing with anticipation. I had been working on a series of paintings that explored the theme of identity, using bold colors and abstract forms to convey the struggle of self-discovery. As I wandered through the gallery, I was struck by a piece that looked eerily familiar. It was my work, my ideas, but it bore his name. The colors, the forms, the very essence of what I had created was there, yet it felt like a dagger to my heart. Betrayal washed over me like a cold wave. I felt exposed, vulnerable, and utterly alone. The whispers of admiration from the crowd felt like a mockery, a cruel reminder of my naivety. How could he do this to me? The man I had trusted, the one I had looked up to as a father figure, had stolen my ideas and claimed them as his own. Anger bubbled within me, a fierce fire igniting my resolve. I had to confront him, to demand justice for the theft of my creativity. But as I stood in front of Marcus, the words caught in my throat. I was torn between the love I had for him and the pain of his betrayal. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but instead, I felt a deep sadness wash over me. How could someone I admired so deeply betray me in such a profound way? The uncertainty of our relationship loomed over me like a dark cloud, and I was left grappling with mixed feelings of admiration and resentment. In the days that followed, I found myself spiraling into despair. I questioned my worth as an artist, wondering if my ideas were ever truly mine or if they were simply echoes of Marcus's influence. The shame of feeling like a victim weighed heavily on my shoulders. I had always believed that art was a reflection of the soul, but now I felt like a hollow shell, stripped of my identity. As I navigated this emotional turmoil, I was tempted to walk away from art altogether. The thought of creating something new felt daunting, and the fear of further betrayal loomed large. But deep down, I knew I couldn't let Marcus's actions define me. I had to reclaim my voice, to fight for recognition in a world that felt increasingly hostile. The conflict within me raged on, a battle between the desire for justice and the longing for forgiveness. I wanted to confront Marcus, to expose his deceit, but I also yearned for the connection we once shared. The struggle for recognition in the art world became a reflection of my internal fight, a quest for validation, not just from others, but from myself. As I stood in front of my easel, paintbrush in hand, I realized that I had a choice to make. I could either let Marcus's betrayal consume me or rise from the ashes of my pain. I chose the latter. I would create, not just to reclaim my ideas, but to forge a new path, one that was authentically mine. The journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but I was determined to find my way back to the canvas, to rediscover the joy of creation, and to reclaim my identity as an artist. The days turned into weeks, and the initial shock of Marcus's betrayal began to morph into a simmering determination. I found myself spending long hours in my small studio apartment, surrounded by half-finished canvases and the remnants of my shattered trust. Each stroke of the brush became a cathartic release, a way to channel my pain into something tangible. I poured my heart into my work, creating pieces that reflected the turmoil within me. The vibrant colors I once used to express joy now became a palette of raw emotions, deep blues of sadness, fiery reds of anger, and muted grays of despair. As I painted, I began to explore the theme of betrayal in my art. I created a series of pieces that depicted fractured relationships, broken mirrors, and distorted reflections. I wanted to capture the essence of my experience, to convey the pain of feeling unseen and unheard. Each canvas became a testament to my struggle, a visual representation of the conflict that raged within me. I felt a sense of empowerment in reclaiming my narrative, even if it was through the lens of my hurt. But as I immersed myself in my work, the reality of the art world loomed large. I had watched Marcus rise to fame, his exhibitions celebrated and his name whispered in reverence. I knew that if I wanted to be recognized, I would have to step out of his shadow and carve my own path. The thought of entering the same circles that had once embraced me as his protégé filled me with uncertainty. What if my work was never seen as anything more than a reflection of his influence? What if I was forever labeled as the artist who had been overshadowed by her mentor? Despite these fears, I decided to take a leap of faith. I submitted my work to a local gallery, a small but respected space that showcased emerging artists. The thought of my pieces hanging on those walls, vulnerable and exposed, sent a shiver down my spine. I was terrified of rejection, of being told that my art was not worthy. But I also felt a flicker of hope, a chance to reclaim my identity and share my voice with the world. As the days passed, I found myself oscillating between excitement and dread. I was consumed by thoughts of the upcoming exhibition, my heart racing at the idea of standing in front of my work, vulnerable yet proud. I wanted to share my story, to let others see the depth of my emotions and the journey I had undertaken. But the fear of being compared to Marcus, of being seen as a mere imitation, gnawed at me. Then came the day of the exhibition. I arrived at the gallery, my heart pounding in my chest. The walls were adorned with the works of various artists, each piece telling its own story. I felt a mix of pride and anxiety as I stood in front of my canvases, the culmination of my pain and resilience. I watched as people moved through the gallery, their eyes scanning the artwork, their expressions shifting from curiosity to contemplation. As the evening unfolded, I found myself engaged in conversations with fellow artists and art enthusiasts. I shared my inspiration, the emotions that fueled my work, and the journey that had led me to this moment. To my surprise, people resonated with my story. They saw the depth of my emotions reflected in my art, and for the first time, I felt a sense of validation. I was no longer just Marcus's protégé, I was an artist in my own right. But amidst the excitement, I couldn't shake the feeling of Marcus's presence looming over me. I knew he would be at the exhibition, and the thought of facing him filled me with dread. I had rehearsed what I would say, the confrontation I had envisioned in my mind. I wanted to demand recognition for my work, to expose the truth of his betrayal. But as the night wore on, I found myself hesitating. The mixed feelings of anger and sadness swirled within me, creating a storm of uncertainty. Finally, as the crowd began to thin, I spotted him across the room. Marcus stood there, a figure of confidence and charm, engaging with admirers who praised his latest work. My heart raced as I approached him, each step feeling heavier than the last. I wanted to confront him, to unleash the torrent of emotions that had been building inside me, but as I drew closer, I felt a wave of shame wash over me. What if he dismissed my feelings? What if he belittled my work, claiming it was derivative of his own? "Congratulations on the exhibition," he said, his voice smooth and polished. There was a hint of pride in his eyes, but I couldn't help but feel it was laced with condescension. "I see you've been busy." "Busy," I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper. "You could say that." He smiled, but it felt hollow. I could see the glimmer of recognition in his eyes, the realization that I had stepped out of his shadow. But instead of feeling triumphant, I was engulfed by a wave of uncertainty. I had spent so long idolizing him, and now, standing before him, I felt like a child confronting a parent who had let them down. The anger I had nurtured began to dissipate, replaced by a deep sadness that threatened to overwhelm me. "Your work is impressive," he continued, his tone almost patronizing. I can see you've taken some risks. It's good to see you finding your own voice." The words stung. I wanted to scream that my voice had always been there, buried beneath layers of doubt and his influence. Instead, I forced a smile, my heart racing as I struggled to find the right words. "Thank you, Marcus. But I can't help but feel that some of my ideas, they seem to echo yours." His expression shifted, a flicker of something, guilt, perhaps, crossing his face before it was replaced by a mask of indifference. "Art is a conversation, my dear. We all draw inspiration from one another. It's how the world works." The dismissal felt like a slap in the face. I had poured my heart into my work, and he was reducing it to mere inspiration? I felt the anger bubbling back to the surface, but I fought to keep it at bay. "Inspiration is one thing, but stealing ideas is another," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "You took my concepts and presented them as your own." He laughed, a sound that felt hollow and mocking. "You're being dramatic. You're an artist now, and you should know that ideas are fluid. They evolve. You can't claim ownership over a feeling or a thought." The words cut deep, and I felt a rush of pain and anger. How could he be so dismissive? I had trusted him, shared my vulnerabilities, and he had twisted them into something that served his own ambitions. I took a step back, my heart racing as I fought to keep my composure. "You may see it that way, but I see it differently. You've taken something that was mine, and it hurts." For a moment, silence hung between us, thick and suffocating. I could see the flicker of realization in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by a defensive posture. "You're young, and you'll learn that the art world is cutthroat. If you want to succeed, you need to toughen up. This is how it works." His words felt like a betrayal all over again. I had come to him seeking guidance, and instead, he was pushing me away, shoving me into a world that felt hostile and unforgiving. I wanted to scream, to tell him that I didn't want to play his games, that I wanted to create art that was true to me, not a reflection of his ambitions. But the words caught in my throat, and I felt a wave of despair wash over me. "Maybe you're right," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe I am too young to understand. But I refuse to let you define my worth as an artist. I will find my own way, even if it means standing alone." With that, I turned and walked away, my heart pounding in my chest. I could feel his gaze on me, a mixture of surprise and something else, perhaps regret? But I didn't look back. I had confronted him, and while it hadn't gone as I had hoped, I felt a sense of liberation in reclaiming my voice. In the days that followed, I threw myself into my work with renewed vigor. I began to explore new themes, pushing the boundaries of my creativity. I experimented with different mediums, incorporating mixed media into my pieces. I wanted to create art that was unapologetically mine, a reflection of my journey and my struggles. The pain of betrayal became a driving force, fueling my desire to create something authentic and powerful. As I worked, I found solace in the act of creation. Each brushstroke became a release, a way to channel my emotions into something beautiful. I began to receive positive feedback from the local art community, and my confidence grew. I was no longer just Marcus's protege, I was an artist in my own right, carving out my own space in a world that had once felt so daunting. But even as I found success, the shadow of Marcus loomed large. I couldn't escape the feeling that he was watching, waiting for me to falter. I had heard whispers of his latest exhibition, where he had showcased a series of pieces that bore an uncanny resemblance to my own work. The thought of him profiting from my pain filled me with a mix of anger and despair. I wanted to confront him again, to expose the truth, but I hesitated. What if it only fueled his ego? What if it pushed me further into obscurity? I found myself at a crossroads, grappling with the question of whether to confront Marcus again or to let my art speak for itself. The latter felt like a more dignified path, but the anger simmering beneath the surface was hard to ignore. One evening, as I was working late in my studio, I received a message from a friend who had attended Marcus's latest exhibition. "You won't believe it," she wrote. "He's showcasing a piece that looks just like your Identity series. It's uncanny. You need to see this." My heart raced as I read her words. The betrayal felt fresh, like a wound that had never fully healed. I knew I had to see it for myself. The next day, I made my way to the gallery where Marcus was exhibiting. As I entered, the atmosphere was electric, filled with the buzz of art enthusiasts and critics. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach as I scanned the room, searching for the piece that had been described to me. And there it was, a large canvas, vibrant and bold, depicting a figure caught in a whirlwind of colors, struggling to break free. It was my work, my vision, and yet it bore his name. I felt a surge of anger and despair wash over me. How could he do this? How could he take something so personal and claim it as his own? I stood there, frozen, as the crowd admired the piece, praising Marcus for his innovative approach and masterful execution. I wanted to scream, to shout that it was my idea, my pain, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I felt a wave of shame wash over me. Was I really going to let him get away with this? As I stood there, grappling with my emotions, I noticed a familiar face in the crowd, an art critic I had admired for years, someone whose opinion could sway the tides of the art world. I had read his reviews, studied his insights, and now he was standing just a few feet away, admiring Marcus's work. I felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this was my chance to expose the truth, to reclaim my narrative. I approached him, my heart pounding in my chest. "Excuse me," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I couldn't help but notice your interest in that piece." He turned to me, his expression curious. "Yes, it's quite striking, isn't it? Marcus has really outdone himself this time." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I was about to say. Actually, that piece bears a striking resemblance to my own work. I created a series exploring similar themes of identity and struggle. I think it's important to acknowledge where inspiration comes from. The critic raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Is that so? I hadn't heard of your work. What's your name?" "Lila Hart," I replied, my heart racing. "I exhibited at the local gallery last month. My pieces were well received, and I've been exploring these themes for some time now." He nodded, his interest piqued. "I'll have to look into it. It's always fascinating to see how artists influence one another." I felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps this was my opportunity to shed light on the truth. I think it's crucial to recognize when ideas are borrowed or appropriated. Art is a conversation, yes, but it should also be a dialogue of respect. He regarded me thoughtfully, and I could see the wheels turning in his mind. "You make a valid point. I'll keep an eye out for your work, Lila. It's important for emerging artists to have their voices heard." As he walked away, I felt a mix of relief and uncertainty. I had taken a step toward reclaiming my narrative, but I knew that the battle was far from over. I still had to confront Marcus, to demand recognition for my ideas. But the thought of facing him again filled me with dread. What if he dismissed my claims? What if he turned the narrative against me, painting me as the bitter protégé unable to let go of the past? That night, I returned to my studio, my mind racing. I poured my emotions onto the canvas, creating a piece that reflected my turmoil, a chaotic blend of colors and forms, a visual representation of my struggle for recognition and justice. As I painted, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. I realized that I didn't need to confront Marcus in a way that would diminish my worth. I could let my art speak for itself, and in doing so, I could reclaim my identity. The following weeks were a whirlwind of creativity and self-discovery. I continued to push the boundaries of my work, exploring new themes and techniques. I began to gain traction in the local art scene, receiving invitations to showcase my work in various exhibitions. Each opportunity felt like a step toward reclaiming my identity as an artist, a chance to share my story and my vision with the world. I was no longer just a shadow of Marcus, I was Lila Hart, an artist in my own right. But even as I found success, the specter of Marcus's betrayal lingered. I had heard whispers of his continued appropriation of my ideas, and the anger that had once fueled my creativity began to morph into something more complex, an understanding of the art world's intricacies and the blurred lines between inspiration and theft. I realized that while I could not control Marcus's actions, I could control my response to them. One evening, as I prepared for another exhibition, I received a call from a prominent art magazine. They wanted to feature my work in an upcoming issue, highlighting my journey as an emerging artist. I felt a rush of excitement mixed with apprehension. This was my chance to share my story, to shed light on the struggles I had faced and the resilience I had found. But I also knew that it would mean confronting the narrative of my relationship with Marcus. As I sat down to discuss the feature with the editor, I felt a mix of vulnerability and strength. I shared my journey, the pain of betrayal, and the process of reclaiming my voice. I spoke candidly about my experiences with Marcus, acknowledging the complexity of our relationship. I wanted to convey that while he had hurt me, I had also learned valuable lessons about my own worth and the importance of authenticity in art. The article was published a few weeks later, and the response was overwhelming. Readers resonated with my story, and I received messages of support from fellow artists and art enthusiasts. I felt a sense of validation that I had longed for, a recognition that my voice mattered. But amidst the praise, I also felt a twinge of guilt. Was I betraying Marcus by sharing my truth? Was I perpetuating a cycle of negativity? As I grappled with these feelings, I realized that forgiveness was a crucial part of my journey. I didn't want to carry the weight of anger and resentment any longer. I had spent so much time focusing on Marcus's actions that I had neglected my own growth. I decided that I would not let his betrayal define me. Instead, I would choose to forgive, not for him, but for myself. With this newfound clarity, I reached out to Marcus. I wanted to have an honest conversation, to express my feelings and seek closure. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I felt it was necessary for my own healing. When we met, the tension was palpable. I could see the surprise in his eyes, but I also sensed a hint of vulnerability beneath his confident exterior. "Lila," he said, his voice cautious. "I didn't expect to hear from you." "I know," I replied, my heart racing. "But I wanted to talk. I've been doing a lot of thinking about our relationship and what happened between us." He nodded, his expression shifting from surprise to curiosity. "I'm listening." I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. "I want to acknowledge the pain I felt when I saw you take my ideas. It hurt deeply, and it made me question my worth as an artist. But I've also realized that I can't let that pain define me. I've found my voice, and I'm proud of the work I'm creating." Marcus's expression softened, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of remorse in his eyes. "I didn't realize how much my actions affected you. I thought I was helping you find your way, but I see now that I was wrong. I'm sorry, Lila." The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. I had expected defensiveness, but instead, I found a willingness to acknowledge the hurt he had caused. "Thank you," I said, my voice trembling. "I appreciate your honesty. I've learned a lot from this experience, and I want to move forward without the weight of anger." We talked for hours, sharing our perspectives and reflecting on our journeys as artists. It was a conversation filled with vulnerability, and as we spoke, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. I realized that while our relationship had been fraught with pain, it had also been a catalyst for my growth. I had emerged stronger, more resilient, and more committed to my art than ever before. As we parted ways, I felt a sense of peace. I had confronted my past, acknowledged the hurt, and chosen to forgive. I knew that the art world would always be complex, filled with challenges and uncertainties, but I was ready to face it head-on. I had reclaimed my identity, and I was determined to continue creating art that was true to me. In the months that followed, I continued to thrive as an artist.